Hello, everybody. And welcome back to the Dynasty Wonderland podcast with me, the Mad Chatter Ryan MK. And of course, as by my side, the March Heron, the salary captain, the wonderful Aaron Stewart, ladies and gentlemen. What's up, buddy?
Oh, not much, man. You know, Monday nights are the highlight of my week. We get to talk shop, and today's a special episode.
It is a special episode. We have a special guest, the director of analytics at Roto Underworld and Player Profiler. He is the code breaker, the luxurious Josh Larkey. Welcome to the Dynasty Wonderland, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing great. Man, what an intro. Like the setup, the delivery, luxurious. I don't think I've ever been called that before, but I like how that sounds.
Good. It sounded good in my brain as well.
I'm ready to talk some shop.
Let's do it. Now, before we really get into stuff, if you want to give us a quick, already fucking up the language. If you want to give us a quick explanation, I was looking at your R coding stuff, and you've got this site. Give the listeners and Aaron and myself a brief explanation of the course and what all you're doing with the site.
So I know for many, myself included, coding is super intimidating. I actually put it off for several years where I had mentor after mentor saying, you know, if you want to break into sports analytics, you need to learn real coding. And I was always terrified. I just wanted to hang out with my Excel spreadsheets. And I was terrified of R and Python and Java and all the other ones. And eventually I caved and started to learn to code. And one thing that I realized is the data sets that analytics is taught with are super boring. It's credit card fraud, housing price data. You're not really predicting anything interesting. And the numbers don't come to life. It's hard to have a big attention span for all of that. And then the other thing is that anyone that's taken a math class knows this. The teacher is in a lecture, they're writing something on the whiteboard, and it makes total sense. And then you go home to do your homework, and it looks absolutely nothing like what you learned in class. And it's way harder. And you think, you know, I really don't believe any of this was taught. So the goal with my course is twofold, which is to have interesting data sets. It's all taught with football. And then the other one is I like to give everybody the answers to the test. If you're learning to code, I don't want you spending hours and hours having to Google, where does the parenthesis go? What am I missing here? I teach you all the hard concepts. And then in the worksheets and the workbooks, there is nothing that you haven't seen in the lesson. And if for some reason you get stuck, I have every single answer fully coded out for you as well. So what I really wanted was an efficient process where I truly believe you can become a proficient R coder in 6 to 12 weeks with the course, just putting in 5 to 10 hours a week on your own. And it's because I just shoot it to you straight. It's fun data. And I think it's I designed it as the course I wish I would have taken instead of having to go to grad school. So that's me describing and selling the course to all of everyone out there in the ether.
Dude, I love it. Honestly, I was looking at it and I was like, I hadn't realized like how deep you went with some of this stuff, and that you had a site and a course. I had not realized that. And I was like, this is freaking awesome. And I've always been solid at math. So I always love, you know, branching out from there. And the coding stuff seems interesting as hell. It does seem difficult as shit, but it sounds like you've kind of got a way to kind of, you know, make it a little bit simpler.
Yeah, that's kind of what I went for. Was I wanted anyone, even without a rigorous math background or coding background, to be able to take the course and enjoy it and be able to progress through it. So that's really what I was aiming for. And I was able to put a ton of time into it. So thank you, San Diego Padres, for furloughing me due to COVID. It turns out that attendance projection models, customer lifetime journeys, and customer values, that none of that on the business end matters when there's a pandemic and you're not allowed to sit in seats. So Thank you to them for furloughing and then laying me off, because I had time to work on this course and then ultimately step up my fantasy football involvement. So it was all for the best.
Right. Very awesome story. Very cool site. And the course looks great. Aaron, did you have anything? Sorry.
I know that I got to take like the first class, and then last year was my introduction in contributing to fantasy football, and I got a little overambitious, kind of did a little too much, and I got away from it. So I am really trying to get my schedule together so I can start back again. I think I'll probably even have to purchase it again because I go through computers like crazy. Like usually I have temporary computers, so I'm like, oh, that may be a bit of a problem. But honestly, I'm all
No,
about
I'll
like,
send you the files. No.
oh, perfect. So
If you've purchased, I'll send them to you. I don't. It obviously I like making some money, but the goal of it is really to make it super accessible. It's why it's $75. I could charge more probably, but I really wanted to keep it affordable because I don't want a price tag to be the reason that someone can't learn to code. So I tried to keep it at what I thought was a very reasonable price, which
Josh is changing the business here.
Right.
It's the Padres' loss is the fantasy football community's gain here because Josh has been
doing
on a
great
meteoric
stuff.
rise.
Yeah. I love it. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and just jump right in to random fantasy thoughts before we get into our wonderful wheel of topics, Gabe. So before we get into that, we'll go ahead and let our guest, Larky, Mr. Larky, anything random fantasy football thought that you got going on in that brain of yours that you would like to present to the Mad Fantasy Party.
So this actually got prompted from I don't even know who this is, but someone entered my DMs with what I thought was a super good question that I think we can discuss a little bit. And they'd listened to my recent code breaker about stacking. And I had a piece in there where I discussed what I defined as a reach. And that I thought of it as kind of like 90% of ADP. So if a player goes ADP 100, if you take them 90 or lower, that's a reach. And they said, okay, but doesn't ADP change over time and over the summer? And I thought it was really interesting, actually, the concept of trying to understand or imagine and kind of think forward as to which players are going to be rising and lowering in ADP as we move closer to the season. And I thought it was super interesting to kind of think about which players have been rising, who's been falling, how we can predict it. Are there certain players where a coach could say something and next thing you know, their ADP goes up 2 or 3 rounds or falls 2 or 3 rounds? So have you guys ever thought about that before? Since it was really circulating on my mind today. And I was like, wow, that's a great question.
Yeah. Cause I guess in particular, there was a news blurb that I think benefited me at Scott Fishbowl because it comes out Tariq Cohen. Oh, he may not be quite like ready because of course right now here in July, like he's not, the season's still 2 months away. Like he's still recovering, of course. So people tend to exaggerate a little bit or even something that may be factually correct. Then the fantasy community goes, oh my God, he's not going to be ready. And I got Tariq Cohen in round 17, like RB 55. It's like, guys, like that's like, what are you doing? You're missing value on this because it's a knee-jerk reaction. You're going, oh no, he may not be ready for week 1, which how's this guy going to know unless he's the doctor?
Also, I think another thing that I've heard a few people talking about is if you grab a guy in like round 15, 18, 20 in the fishbowl, I mean, you're not starting that guy week 1.
Right.
No one's grabbing that guy. And it's like, well, that's my week 1 starter. Because when I posted my kicker thread, I immediately got some pushback today from people where they're like, yeah, well, what about the first few weeks of the season? And you're not going to start one of these random rookies week 1, are you? And I was like, I agree. Like, I'm not going to start Josh Palmer week 1, but I'm not going to start this kicker week 1 either. So I don't think that's not how you should be framing this. It was like, well, of course I'm not going to start these guys. These are guys at the end of my bench. These are like the total dart throws where if one of your final 7 picks is startable, you've already won.
Right.
Exactly. Like shoot for upside. Like, geez, like, you use the early rounds to make sure you can fill the starting lineup week 1. Because I watched a lot of teams do. We'll get into a Scott Fishbowl later, but teams that are just like, drafting third QB super early, and it's like, geez, you're passing on a starting receiver. maybe
Mhm.
tight end. And, if you missed out on one of the top guys, you need to be trying to find maybe a couple of those mid-round tight ends so that between those two, you have a starting tight end. So it's people are just, they over, like, it's simple concepts when you really think about it, but people just overthink it. They go so much for value. And I think sometimes when you talk about ADP, sometimes people draft too much. They focus so much on, oh, it's good value, and it doesn't fit their team, the strategy at all. Like off camera here, we were talking about how this team's drafting the fourth quarterback on their team because they're like, oh, I can't believe he fell so far. He's such a value. Like, okay, like when are you going to start your fourth quarterback? And if you're starting your fourth quarterback, you're screwed. So like, stop it with value. That's not how you use value.
Yeah, no one's winning any type of big redraft tournament with Tyrod Taylor in their super flex. Like if that's what it's come to, yeah, like you said, you're not going to get first place. Just accept it. Why did you take that guy?
Because who's still available around those picks. I mean, I had some rookie receivers, Elijah Moore, Terrace Marshall, even Sterling Shepard in my particular division went wide receiver 80. Like some of these guys get pushed way down because value, quarterback, super flex. So, stop it, people. Use ADP the proper way. Don't do it. It's not Dynasty. It's not Dynasty. It's 1 year. Your job is to draft the best team, the team with the best ceiling. Like, I only have 2 quarterbacks. And you know what? That's probably all I'm going to have.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I think when it comes to ADP for me, it's such in flux because there are things that do move players up and down, even if they probably shouldn't. So it's definitely something I pay attention to because I like to kind of get guys if I can get them cheap. And there's plenty of times during the Scott Fishbowl draft, I'm like, I think I can wait on this guy and get this guy here because it doesn't look like people are as interested in this guy as I am. And like, I can't tell you how late I got fucking Brian Edwards, and maybe he pans out, maybe he doesn't, but he is going to start to begin the season as he did last year. If he stays healthy, who the fuck knows? So, to get him that late,
Mm-hmm.
like how nobody. Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'll take him. And so I did. And it's just, so that's the thing. But as soon as you hear one little thing, I think it was what it was, it can skyrocket that dude. So it's actually one of the reasons I like drafting early in the summer because some people complain because they're like, we don't know enough about what's going on. And I'm like, perfect. Because I feel like I do because I have a crystal ball, you see, it's back there and I will use it. And it doesn't always work, but it's done well for me. And so I like drafting early in the summer because I feel like I can kind of figure some things out where maybe average players aren't. And then plus that's before you get to training camp and you hear this little thing and that little thing and just ADP.
Yeah, I really like going early summer for rookies and guys where we don't really know if they're going to get replaced in the draft. So I love doing like the late March drafting. And I was just pounding like Gaskin, Mike Davis, Chase Edmonds. It was all the random guys where I was like, you know what? Maybe he gets replaced. Maybe he doesn't. Like, we don't really know. Like, yeah, I whiffed on some Melvin Gordons because of Javonte. And those teams might be dead. But you know what? I have some pretty crazy teams where I got like Mike Davis or Myles Gaskin at pick like 110 or something.
Mm-hmm.
Because everyone just assumed that they were going to get replaced. Same with like Najee Harris was going in the 4th round pre-draft. And it's like, don't you realize that he's going to go in the 1st round and he's huge, and whichever team takes him is going to give him 25 touches a game as a rookie. And this is not really where his ADP should be. So I think that there's those types of situations like Rondale Moore, you could get at like pick 190 or something pre-draft because he's small. And it's like, well, he's probably going to go like pretty early day 2. And then his ADP is going to rise quite a bit. So I think it's interesting to place those bets. So I'm trying to think now of like which guys I do think come season will be significantly higher or lower. So
Mhm.
I think it's kind of an interesting thought experiment. So could be a fun article topic at some point, like the guys we expect a month and a half, 2 months from now to
To
be just
rise.
in a totally different stratosphere. Like I think ETN is one of those guys where
Mhm.
if which I expect that he's taking most of the first team reps in training camp because they took a running back round 1,
Mhm.
that his ADP shoots up to the 3rd round. If people go, oh, this is a round 1 running back, he's explosive, he catches passes, and he has Trevor Lawrence, which is like the best of both worlds. The mobile quarterback freezes linebackers, and he's the also like the unicorn mobile quarterback who loves targeting the running back, as evidenced by how much he targeted ETN in college. So really interesting to try and think about like which guys one little thing breaks their way and they just totally smash where they're currently going.
I love it. All right, Aaron, do you got anything quick? Few minutes left, and we take
Yeah.
a break before we get into our game. What you got?
Yeah, so just real quick here. A lot of times, fantasy football leagues, quick story, just a few years ago, I was almost burned out in fantasy football because I'd be in like 6, 7 leagues and it's the same scoring format every time. It's like, oh my gosh, like it's so boring because all the waivers are the same and everything. So I found that always looking at ways to adjust the scoring format, and in particular, like Scott Fishbowl kind of does this too. The kickers in a big 14-team home league that's called BFLE. I say it's best friends last for eternity. The other guys say it's best fucking league ever. Whichever works for you. So we've adjusted the scoring for kickers and team defenses as well. And like kickers, we started doing a fractional system for field goals and the extra points, because the extra points kind of, when they changed that and the extra point was now like, what is it, a 27-yard field goal? It's like, how can a field goal that's 19 yards be worth more points than the extra point that's a longer distance kick? So we changed our system to where it just goes, it's based off how far away the kick is. We try things out, and if we give it a year or two, doesn't work, then we go back. But we have to kind of normalize that too. And like home leagues, like stop doing the same old. Try and tinker things a little bit. We managed to get the same 14 people back in the league, and when you have that type of continuity, you can kind of go a little bold. We started. We're gonna be a keeper league. Like we're gonna choose like one keeper, and it may become more. We're gonna try it this year. If not, then we go back to just regular redraft. But with those home leagues, spice it up a little bit. The team defense one, this is a fun one. So it's the major points on this is your defense starts with 15 points, and you lose points not just from points allowed, but also yardage, because sometimes a defense can do a good job, but if you got Drew Lock throwing interceptions in short fields and the poor defense has to defend like on the 10-yard line, it's the defense gets penalized because of the offense. So there's less of a deduction from points scored, but also like if you're going out there and allowing 500 yards of offense and it's the other team just can't seem to score touchdowns, you're still going to be deducted points as well. You still weren't a good defense if you're giving up so many yards. So it's a nice little twist there. I think some people in the home leagues, they didn't like it when defenses, I think I had the Rams a few years ago. My opponent, the Rams, scored like 40. No, the Falcons, I think, played the Rams and scored like 40 points. That's like, oh God, I can't get beat by a defense like that. So this format, you're not going to have the extremes. Like you're not going to have like 20 plus points, but you're also not going to have negative points from defenses, because everyone's experienced that at some point. They start a defense and it was better to just not start a defense at all. If you used the Cowboys defense, I don't know why he would do that, but you're probably best just leaving it on the bench. So it was very, like, if a defense put up negative points, they were super, super bad. So some people go, it devalues defenses too much, but you maybe try to find a happy medium in there.
I like that. That's interesting. It harkens me back to I've played a few leagues on the most advanced platform out there, CBS Sports, And I don't think they do very many things well, but their defense does factor in yardage, which I always thought was a really good way to do it.
Yeah.
There's a lot wrong with their platform. They don't use fractional scoring for a lot of stuff, but the way they do defense, I always thought was interesting. And it's a very similar way where it's a combination of yards allowed and points. Because, like you said, Drew Lock throws an interception and they return it to the 12-yard line. They're at least going to get a field goal, probably a touchdown. But I mean, if they hold them to a field goal, do you really want to penalize the defense for giving them no yardage? So I think it's interesting. So I'm a full supporter of having the yardage factored in, just because I think it's just like when half PPR and PPR came into play, where people started to realize, you know what, receptions aren't random and that like touchdowns are random. So if anything, let's find a scoring system that deprioritizes touchdowns if they're so random. And I mean, half PPR, full PPR, players score more, touchdowns are worth less relatively. So then you're actually incentivizing people to understand the game and realize that what we want to bank on is usage, not crossing your fingers that your running back has a touchdown and just breaks fantasy, because no one can catch up to a 50-yard, 1 touchdown performance in standard.
Absolutely. And then the other extreme, and I know we've got to enter a break here in about a minute, but the other extreme with PPR was like the Edelman special, 9 catches, 53 yards. It's like, oh my gosh, why is that like almost 15 points? We actually do a tiered PPR. So it was, you'd get like a quarter of a point for like 1 to 4 yard catches. So you get points for catching, but it's what the guy did with the ball afterwards. So that was kind of the next level stuff too, along with the first downs, because first downs are more predictive, I think, than touchdowns. Touchdowns, sometimes you just happen to be Robert Tonyan just in the end zone with Aaron Rodgers.
Ebron like 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah, there's always that guy.
Exactly. First downs, I think, is more indicative of a player and how good they are if they're moving the chains.
All right, very well said. With that, let's get into a break and we'll come back for the topic wheels. The wheel of topics. Yeah, game. There we go. We'll be back. Okay, we are back. Once again with Mr. Larkin. We now get into the Wheel of Topics game. And I'll go ahead and give it a spin of Rudy. We're going to let the guest go first once again. So here we go. Let's see what we got. I guess I could have listed the topics. Off-season narrative. So we'll get into a topic. They each have a few minutes. I'll try and keep a timer. And I might just award some meaningless points at the end of each round. We'll see how it goes. So let's go ahead and get into it. Off-season narratives. Mr. Larky, kick us off.
I would love to talk about the off-season narrative of Jamal Williams and how he's apparently going to ruin DeAndre Swift in fantasy this year. What's going on there? Do you want me to kick off why I think this is totally falsifiable, or do I kick this to Aaron and then I go back? What's the order?
By all means, go ahead and start with your opinion on the situation.
So I know that the whole hullabaloo was Anthony Lynn said Jamal Williams was the A-back, when later in the interview, the A-back essentially sounds a lot like the between the 20s grinder who does a lot of 3rd and 1 runs up the middle. He didn't really say anything about how the A-back gets all the pass catching work or all the goal line work. And Jamal Williams, career backup, day 3 pick. He never seemed to hinder Aaron Jones from being a top 5 running back in back-to-back seasons these past 2 years. I don't quite know why it's going to affect Swift. I understand it's not a great offense, but you know what? DeAndre Swift is not getting drafted as if he's a top 5 running back like Aaron Jones, even though I would say they're very similar talents. And I expect DeAndre Swift to out-target Aaron Jones this year. So I don't quite understand it. You really just, simply put, you cannot find a running back that's getting 60 or more catches in a season who isn't returning outrageous value in half PPR and PPR formats. So if Swift is going mid to late round 3, early round 4 at this point, I just can't stop drafting the guy. I don't know what I'm missing. I mean, if you look at McKissick and Hines from last year, who got no goal line carries and under 100 rushes on the season, those were both RB2s by the end of the year. I mean, these guys put up points. So just imagine that, but with 100 more carries and goal line work and quite possibly better efficiency, because DeAndre Swift's just flat out way better at football than those guys. So let me keep grabbing DeAndre Swift in that late RB, like low end RB2 range, when he has the low end RB1 upside, which is incredibly easily attainable, assuming that his target share doesn't just disappear poof, which I don't see happening with that receiving core.
Go ahead, Aaron.
And just to add on that one too, it's like with Swift, man, look at the offensive line. There's actually talent there on the offensive line. So people keep going, oh, Detroit's going to be so bad. Usually the teams that we think are going to be the worst team in the NFL, they always surprise you. And there's things to like on offense. It's not going to be a Kansas City type offense, but you could see that they're constructing an identity at least. Hey, the receivers are just going to be there to run straight lines, keep the safeties off, and it's going to run through Swift and Hawkinson. And yeah, Jamal Williams, like, he's going to get work, of course, because there's very few running backs that are going to get all the touches. But most importantly for Swift, the touches he gets, they matter. And last season with Adrian Peterson, still getting the corpse of Adrian Peterson, getting all the carries. We saw at the start of the season, there was a game, week 3, that DeAndre Swift had 0 carries. And yet he was still able to make plays in the passing game. Like he only ran 4 routes. It was a weird usage, but they still targeted him twice in that game, despite like only running 4 plays. And he didn't top 5 carries first 4 weeks, and yet he still had a RB17 and 2 RB28 weeks. And not bad for a guy that's not getting any work. You're literally like that is his absolute floor. And of course he's not going to see just 5 carries. Otherwise Anthony Lynn needs to immediately go, along with Dan Campbell. But the narrative I like is just quarterbacks. Like, what's going to happen with some quarterbacks? Briefly, just Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, could they get traded? Like, it's a weird time. Like, we don't usually have starting QBs with this type of uncertainty. The Deshaun Watson in particular, things have gotten really, really quiet. And it's a little unnerving because they've been covering the heck out of that. And it's not like the media would stop covering it. I have a feeling like things are getting settled. Like there's literally, I haven't heard anything. So those teams that went bold in best ball and went to Deshaun Watson, they may get bailed out. You're in Scott Fishbowl though, and you're drafting them in the top 10 rounds or so. Like that's stupid. It's just pure luck if you drafted Watson and he gets out. But the other quarterback thing too that doesn't get talked about is we've got 3 quarterbacks that are due for extensions, and 2 of them could reset the market, which it's not saying much. Quarterback market gets reset every year. But Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, could one of those 2 guys, could they be the first $50 million per year contract amongst quarterbacks? And to put that in perspective, Patrick Mahomes, of course, right now, he's making $45 million per year. And Dak Prescott got the $40 million per year with a ton of cash, a ton of upfront money. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, you can make the case. You could definitely say they're better than Prescott. Not that Prescott's trash by any means, but those 2 guys, what they've done the past 2 seasons, they've had some remarkable seasons. Are they Patrick Mahomes level? No, but the other thing is that NFL salary cap is expected to shoot right back up. COVID was weird. Nobody could plan for it. That's why the salary cap decreased a lot, but it's expected to go back up to $208 million in 2022, and each of the next 4 seasons goes up $10 million. So it's not that they're worth $50 million and Patrick Mahomes is only worth $45 million. Quarterback market gets reset each year. So which one of those 2 guys are going to be the $50 million guy, and what's Baker going to get? Like, because he's no scrub. He's probably a better NFL quarterback than a fantasy quarterback, but he wins. He makes a lot. Like you pull him up on Player Profiler, and the advanced stats don't lie. Like he makes a lot of great plays. The money throws 39, I believe, number 2, and low passes that were deemed dangerous. Like he's going to get paid as well. So I'm interested to see what happens with all 5 of those quarterbacks.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think the one that I'm probably most interested in is to see what happens with Lamar, just because the way that he plays, we haven't really seen a quarterback ever play like that for an extended period of time. I mean, Michael Vick, just so many injuries throughout his career. Kyler Murray, we really haven't seen enough yet, but he doesn't even run as much as Lamar. And he had a couple injuries last year where there were certain weeks where he just wasn't able to run at all. So I think Lamar will be interesting in terms of if they try and set his contract up where they're mitigating some of that injury risk. I'll be very curious to see what that structure looks like, because if I knew I was getting healthy Lamar, yeah, the guy's worth probably 50 million a year with what he brings to an offense. I mean, he had god awful skill position players the last 2 seasons and was still putting up numbers. So you know that you can run an offense through him without basically anything else. But 2 years from now, do I think that he's going to be a starting quarterback in the league? I don't know. The injury concerns in my mind and just his play style, and what if he loses a step in the next couple of years? I think there's just a lot of uncertainty with a profile like that, where we just really haven't seen anyone that mobile have a long career. And that Russ is really the one comparison people make, except Wilson is more of a tactical scrambler than Lamar. He's running, I don't know, 5 times a game compared to 8 to 15, depending on the game. So it's hard to compare anybody to Lamar right now. I mean, Trey Lance might be that in a few years, but Jalen Hurts could be that in a few years. But we really have yet to see someone as mobile as Lamar get that extension.
And I don't know if it's just me, but I feel a little more confident in Lamar. I feel like I don't really see Lamar take the big hits as a lot of other mobile quarterbacks of his style. But maybe it's something I'm missing. But when you talk about his contract, I do think that is definitely going to be interesting, because he doesn't have an agent. He's likely going to be using a lawyer. Who knows what the Ravens will try and put in the contract, because an average lawyer isn't going to know what to look for, I don't think, in those kinds of contracts. So it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out. And Aaron and I have talked about it. I do believe that Baker, damn it, who's the other one? Allen. Those guys are waiting to see what happens with Lamar before they strike. That's what I think. Because he is the one that's in a little bit more of a precarious position. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. Anybody have anything else on the topic before the rest before I just did want to say this. I got DeAndre Swift in the 4th round of the Scott Fishbowl draft. I just wanted to say that.
Bravo.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
I think one thing that I'll say about Baker, Lamar, and Josh Allen, you're looking at 3 really competent front offices where all 3 of them have weaknesses. And if you look at where they're at right now and the offenses they're in systems that are designed to maximize their talent. They have skill position players that help them maximize their talent. Mm-hmm. And I think that those 3 teams have just done really well, where you could see those 3 guys on another team crashing and burning. So I think that's interesting that all 3 of them have been so successful the past few seasons. And I think that they were all 3 kind of landing spot dependent when you think about it. Not that any of us could have really predicted how the teams would build around them, but just now that we've seen the type of offenses that they're in and what their limitations are, these are 3 teams that seem to know how to maximize their talent.
It's so important for quarterbacks, just real quick too, because the other 2 first-round quarterbacks in that draft class, Josh Rosen and Sam Darnold. Rosen is hanging on by a thread to his NFL career. And Darnold, he's one more bad season away from being in that spot. Like, honestly, I'm shocked at how many opportunities that they're going to give this guy. So you're right. Like the front office, like for any position, like it's quarterback that's more dependent on just the stability and a good coaching staff, a good front office. So, but excited. It's an interesting time. I don't know if we've ever had three guys all coming off rookie contracts that are all going to get a lot of money.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can't think of a year.
Going to be interesting. All right, we'll move along. Before we do, the way I'm going to do the points is I'm going to have 5 points total to give, and I'll disperse them between the two of you each round. Mr. Larky, hell of a way to start us off. You get all 5 points this round. And don't worry, Aaron. It's okay. They really don't mean anything. So don't worry. Okay, now let's get back to this. Let's spin again.
I think I
They
scored
don't mean
0
anything,
points last
but
time.
it's 5-0, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, right. And we're not doing that again. So we'll spin again. Best ball strategy. Aaron, we'll go ahead and let you go first this time.
Right.
Get us going on some best ball strategy discussion.
So in following Josh Larkey here and our boy Chris, the early down grinder, like in learning that you have to maximize each roster spot, and you also have to know where to draft and where to avoid positions. So I have found that as I've gotten better, when I first started doing best ball drafts, I went RB heavy big time. Like I'm talking going 4 RBs to start the draft. And looking back on that, I'm like, no, there's no way. Like that doesn't maximize your starting lineup at all, because you can only start with 3 of those running backs. So my ideal build when I can pull it off is 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 10 receivers, and 2 tight ends. Like I love loading up on receivers, because receivers, you can get them everywhere. I mean, there's guys at the end of the draft, the middle of the draft. You want to grab some stud guys, and usually what I'm trying to do, we like the same stacks, Josh. I'm either trying to get Hopkins or Lockett, Metcalf. I'm trying to get those guys and stack them with Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson, because whenever I'm in drafts that doesn't have Roto Underworld people, I can always get Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson. I can get Kyler in the 5th round, Russell Wilson in the 6th round. I'm almost guaranteed to get half my stack right off the bat. So usually the first 4 rounds, I'm going 2 RBs, 2 receivers. Then the 5th through 7th rounds is where I'm grabbing a quarterback. I love the running backs that are there. I mean, that's Travis Etienne, Myles Gaskin, Trey Sermon, Chase Edmonds. They're just sitting there in the 5th, 6th, 7th round. So if those guys are my 3rd RB, I'm pumped, especially because like Edmonds, you can stack them with Kyler Murray. The 8th round, I love the 8th and 9th round for receivers. This is the Mike Williams, Curtis Samuel, Antonio Brown, Brandon Cooks, Will Fuller. So yeah, usually kind of going in, I'm like, I want to get this position within ADP, but I know who to expect in those rounds. And when it gets to the final third of the draft, it's basically all receivers. It's the Josh Palmers, the Dwayne Eskridges, targeting guys on good offenses that are the 3rd receiver, in which all they need is 1 injury, and boom, they're getting some good production there. I may get like a tight end, depending, like if I manage to get Darren Waller. Freaking love Darren Waller this year. Broke my heart when I couldn't get him in the 1st round, Scott Fishbowl. But if I'm getting a Darren Waller, like I'm not drafting a tight end till 16, 17, 18th round. Like, what's the point? Like I'm going all in with Darren Waller, so I need to maximize the rest of my team. But basically, the more drafts I do, the less running backs I got. I think I started with 6 running backs when I would do some of my early drafts, and then it was like, okay, 5's a good number. I was like, maybe not. I'm going to go even bolder and go 4, because you know what? I'm swinging for the fences. If I finish last place, okay, luck wasn't on my side. If I finish 2nd place, yeah, I may win some money, but I'm not like bragging about it. I'm either going for 1st or I'm going for broke. But the build, the 2, 4, 10, 2, that's my favorite build so far. Those are the teams I absolutely love.
So I was big 2, 4, 10, 2 like a couple months ago. And then one thing that I started to realize was I still get a good amount of those. I got one of those earlier today, actually, in a draft, but I've started to get really into the the 3 cheap quarterback builds where you can heavily stack 3 cheaper quarterbacks, where I kind of let the draft fall to me the first 3, 4, 5 rounds. And then I sort of evaluate who's on my team at that point. So if I have Terry McLaurin, I'm thinking, all right, let's start to look at Fitzpatrick. If I have Galladay, I'm like, all right, let's start to look at Daniel Jones. And I've started, or if I have Waller, I look at Derek Carr. And I've started to really enjoy this new, it's kind of new for me, but it's the 3 cheap quarterback build where I'll get some type of combination of like Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa, Carson Wentz, those types of guys, Daniel Jones, Derek Carr, Fitzpatrick, and that I've actually started to really enjoy those teams because I can get a lot more correlation there. And then I don't feel like I'm as obligated to need to reach on anybody early rounds because I'm knowing that if I don't end up landing like a Hopkins Murray or something, or if I take Hopkins and Murray gets sniped from me, or I take Diggs and someone takes Allen, it's okay. This is just a stud receiver on my team that kind of fell to me. And I can still now pivot. And you can even get like an Brian Edwards, Derek Carr at the end of your draft. You can get Sterling Shepard, Daniel Jones at the end of your draft. So I've started to try and be a little bit more flexible recently, and it's led to a lot more of the 3 quarterback builds. I still love the 2 dominant QB stacked up. My couple favorite teams are when I actually do the Cardinals Seahawks double stacks. And the reason for that is not only am I getting crazy correlation if I have like Murray Hopkins and Russ Lockett, where we know how dependent those quarterbacks are and those pass catchers and vice versa, but it's intra-divisional correlation where we know that those teams are going to play each other twice during the season. So I'm trying to start to think about intra-divisional correlation where if I take Herbert, I would love if I had it's nice to take Herbert when I have Tyreek Hill or Kelsey in the first round, and that I'm getting kind of that intra-divisional correlation where if Herbert explodes during the season, there's a good chance that those Chargers Chiefs games are high scoring. So I think it's really interesting to think about how to be more and more flexible the more drafts I do, where I do love those 2, 4, 10 twos, but that sometimes I feel like the way the board falls to me, I go, you know what? I think I can wait on a stud quarterback. And I really like these receivers, or I really like these running backs. Let's just keep getting bell cows. So it's kind of interesting. I feel like now I'm kind of in between these hyper fragile running back builds with a ton of receivers. And then these builds where I actually have a good amount of receivers early and only 1 or 2 stud running backs. And then at the very end of the draft, I try and tack on like a Ty Johnson who goes final round of drafts, but still has like a 1 in 3 chance of being the starter week 1. So I think there's a few arbitrage plays there where I'm starting to warm up to how every single strategy has its place at times based on how the draft unfolds.
Interesting. I got to try that. I'm a little out of practice. There's going to be a lot of articles coming out from me soon. So I've been in a dark room with 3 monitors pumping out articles, and I'm about a week out of practice on doing some best ball. So I need to get back into it.
I really like what both of you guys said, but Larky, the divisional aspect of it is very fucking interesting, and I definitely would like to look more into that. And I also tend to go a lot of 3 QBs, and I have a lot of Daniel Jones and Kenny Galladay. I've been grabbing some Mac Jones and then grabbing a Hunter Henry like at the end of the draft. I still like to get a top QB, a top tight end. I'm a big believer in positional advantage. Whether it's dynasty redraft, I like to have one of the top guys, so I know I have one of the top guys at the scarcer positions. And so that's kind of the way I go about it. I like to get those guys, my running backs early, and then I just pound wide receiver. That's usually how I go about it. But I have found myself with a quite a bit of the Daniel Jones, Kenny Galladay stack, and I'm really not upset about it. So we will move on. Next topic. Okay. Oh, wait. Let me see. I think I'm gonna go ahead and give you some points there, Aaron. That was a decent one. You did. I should say I'll give you point. We'll give you one. We'll give Larky 4 because he had the whole divisional thing. I mean, so it doesn't
There's
matter.
four teams in a division.
Right.
I see.
Okay. And but off-season narratives are fucking again. But come on. Backfields in flux, my friends. Mr. Larky, go ahead and start us off on this one.
Well, I sort of alluded to it with Ty Johnson, but I think the New York Jets backfield is just fascinating because I'm doing a lot of underdog drafting, and Michael Carter's ADP, it's about 90. Tevin Coleman's in the 170s, and then Ty Johnson's in the 210s, and you grab him at the end of drafts.
Mhm.
And I think it's really interesting because I personally have no idea who the starter is going to be. I don't actually know who does know who the starter is going to be, but I've seen a ton of what I consider really sharp people on Twitter hyping up Michael Carter when, if you just look at him in a vacuum, it's a small day 4 running back who has never been a workhorse. And it's not like we think this is going to be some prolific offense either. So
Right.
How is Michael Carter going ahead of Leonard Fournette, Ronald Jones? I mean, Fournette and Ronald Jones at least have a 50-50 chance of being the starter on a way better offense. Yet they go later than Michael Carter. So I think those kind of things are interesting. So I'm about ready to drop Michael Carter pretty precipitously in my rankings as I've come to that realization that, you know what? Yes, I think he's talented. It's kind of fun to think about the shifty pass catching back being relevant. But at the end of the day, like, what are we doing with these ambiguous backfields? Why not just take the cheap guys? So I actually, a couple times in my best ball drafts, I have quote unquote handcuffed. And if I'm really weak at running back and really just want to bank points, I'll grab Tevin Coleman and Ty Johnson towards the end of drafts, thinking, you know what? If I get 2/3 of the running back starts for the Jets, I'm in business with a 16th and 18th round pick on underdog. And that, yes, I took 2 running backs at the same position, but what I truly believe is that they're going to kind of rotate who starts. And I don't believe it's going to be the kind of thing where one guy is just given the reins and it's, okay, you are just the starter for the season. I think it's going to be kind of a hot hand game to game thing. So if I can lock up, give or take 2/3 of the running back production at the very end of my draft, I think it's kind of an interesting concept where we really haven't seen 2 guys be so cheap before and going in round 16 and 18 when they have a realistic chance where this is the week 1 starting running back there.
I dig it. Go ahead, Aaron.
And for me, an interesting one is the Denver backfield because I love Javonte Williams. I do. But Melvin Gordon is there. And the thing is, right now, this backfield, it is a coin flip of where it could go. Because I just pulled up Javonte Williams underdog ADP, and it's 63, and it keeps going up. That's the crazy thing. I believe in my Scott Fishbowl division, he went in round 5, I believe. And I was like, ooh, like he is a high risk, high reward running back. I love Javonte Williams, but here's some of the numbers with Melvin Gordon is even last year, he was top 30 juke rate, true yards per carry, breakaway run rate, yards created per touch. I mean, he's not what he used to be, but he still showed some of the stats there where it's like, okay, he's not a guy that's just going to go sit on the bench. And I mean, unless Javonte Williams is Nick Chubb, right? Where Nick Chubb could be productive even with Kareem Hunt still getting some work. Like, my goodness, like Javonte Williams, he's either going to be a league winning running back this year, or you're going to draft him and you go, what the hell was I thinking? Like making him one of my 2 starting running backs. But also the plot thickens on this because, of course, Denver got a new GM. They got George Patton. And Patton brought in a depth running back, Mike Boone, not a threat to take over any starting role. But of course, the new GM is going to bring in one of his guys. He came from Minnesota. He brought in Mike Boone. And of course, being the salary captain, I had to look into the contract there with Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon is in the last year of his contract, and they can actually save money cutting him this year. It's a lot of dead cap, but it's the last year of his contract. If they don't believe that Melvin Gordon's in the plan, and most staffs that come in, they want to get their guys. And Melvin Gordon did have some stats that didn't look so good too. I know there's not really a strong correlation of the expected points added, but like Melvin Gordon was, I want to say, if he wasn't last amongst running backs, he was like next to last. It makes you wonder, because I really like that stat that you introduced, a player profiler, because I feel like that stat allows us analysts to understand when teams decide to bring in players at position. Because, we go Melvin Gordon, he's been fantasy productive for so long. Why they trade up and draft a running back early second round? Then you start looking, you're like, okay, I can make a case. If that's what they're looking at, and that's the closest stat we have that quantifies like what they're doing on the field to winning games. And so I saw that. I was like, okay, I could see why people love Javonte Williams, and they could cut him. They can save money. I thought Royce Freeman would be the cut, but you know what? They save more money cutting Gordon if they believe in Javonte Williams. That's why I'm like, Javonte Williams is either the league winning running back this year in fantasy football, or if Gordon's still there, he's gonna get half the work. Like, you're not just gonna sit Melvin Gordon. Like even last year when he wasn't playing so well, he was still splitting work with Philip Lindsay. Ooh, that leaves a bad taste in my mouth mentioning Philip Lindsay. But that's the backfield that it's either a 50-50 timeshare, and those people drafting Javonte Williams look stupid, or those people are going to be pretty damn lucky.
Yeah, I think with Javonte, I kind of see him as pretty much at his ADP right now, a total stay away. If you're just in a casual 12-team best ball league right now, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. He's probably not going to be the day one starter and get all the work.
Right.
So in that case, if you're playing in a league where it's seasonal points, I don't think Javonte's great there. I think he's much better in a tournament where you say, you know what, he's probably going to be in some type of timeshare with Gordon or Boone or something like that. And then come mid-season, the coaches will realize this guy's pulling away. He's going to get a lot more work. We saw it last year with Jonathan Taylor. We saw it with DeAndre Swift. We saw it with Dobbins. We saw it with Akers. Pretty much all these guys get more work at the end of the season than at the start of the season. So yes, in a tournament when you're playing for huge money in advancing in rounds in the week 15 or week 16 or whatever, sure, Javonte Williams is a savvy play if you think he's going to be the full-on bell cow by then. But if you're trying to bank points each week and it's just whoever has the most total points at the end of the season, I don't think Javonte is nearly as good of a play, because like you said, there's a very good chance he's timeshared for at least a decent portion of the season. And you don't want to be grabbing a guy in the 5th or 6th round who's going to be getting you 5 to 8 points the first half of the season.
I really like what both of you guys said pertaining to Denver, because I love Javonte Williams, particularly in Dynasty. But when it comes to these different like best ball and even standard, even in the Scott Fish Bowl, I had my eye on him, but he went super fucking high. And I'm just like, okay, I can't get him that high. He's getting to a point where he is, like you said, stay away zone. Yep. So I'm with you on that. And the Jet stuff, I'm a big proponent as well of grabbing the cheapest guy in that kind of backfield. And that's why I'm going to throw in just real quickly the San Francisco 49ers backfield, because you got Raheem Mostert there. He's getting older, was banged up last year. We'll see what happens with him. They drafted Trey Sermon in the 3rd, but they drafted Elijah Mitchell in the 5th. Very similar, but faster. So I've been taking a crap ton, particularly in rookie drafts, a crap ton of Elijah Mitchell because I'm taking that dart throw in final rounds. I grabbed him at the end of the Scott Fishbowl draft just because I want to take that dart throw because I love the offense. And who knows really what's become of that. You figure Mostert probably starts, Sermon's going to get some work, but if Elijah Mitchell goes in there in camp and really shows out, he could get a piece of the action too. So, and they got Jeff Wilson there, but he's hurt, I believe. And I feel like that one is definitely up in the air.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I took Sermon middle of the 9th round in my Scott Fish draft, and we still have 6 rounds left. And I've actually thought about grabbing 1 or 2 of like Mitchell and Gallman because these later round picks, they never pan out. Anyone that's ever played redraft dynasty, anything like that, no matter how much you love your team, by week 4, you have several new characters in your lineup.
Oh yeah.
Either on your bench or even in your starting roster. So this early in the offseason, I feel like is the perfect time to load up on those ambiguous backfields. San Francisco's a really good one. So I took Sermon, and 1 or 2 of these next 6 picks will probably be some combo of Mitchell and Gallman because they're super cheap and I have no idea what they're going to do. I mean, if you just look at the San Francisco backfield the past few years, nobody had any idea how it was going to play out. But all we know is that for some reason, this backfield by season's end seems to have a whole lot of fantasy points. So I don't think that's going to change. It looks like it's going to be a pretty good offensive line. We're going to have a mobile quarterback, which is going to help the efficiency of these running backs. So I'm pretty excited to take a few dart throws on these guys and then just cross my fingers and see if one guy can run away with it. Sort of like 2 years ago when Mostert had that ridiculous second half of 2019, or was it 2020? No, 2019, because last year was when he kind of fizzled. Yeah, 2019, the second half, Mostert was just a total league winner out of absolute nowhere.
Indeed. I love it. Agree 100%. Get on to the next topic. Okay. All right. Last spin of the wheel before we get out of here. Oh, goddamn, the off-season narratives again. I can't believe
Off-season narratives.
No, Scott Fishbowl chatter.
There we go.
Fishbowl chatter. Mr. Larky, get us going, whether it be strategy. We've already gotten into it a little bit. So why don't you just go ahead and whatever it is, how your draft is going, your strategy, all that good stuff, whatever you want to chat about pertaining to the good old Scott Fishbowl.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about people just kind of whiffing on picks because I think that's kind of funny. I think it's kind of instructive as to how I think you should be playing this, especially in the later rounds. We touched on it a little bit where I'm like, oh, I'll probably grab just random SF running backs and cross my fingers one hits. What you should be doing at the end of your draft, and where I feel like I've gotten the bigger edge as the draft has gone on, is that like, yeah, it's going to be fairly chalk the first, 5, 6, 7, whatever many rounds. There's not going to be that many picks where you look at it and go bug-eyed and chuckle that, well, that guy flubbed his pick, or that woman flubbed their pick. But I feel like these later rounds is where it's starting to separate, where I'm grabbing guys that I can envision. This is when I would start them in my lineup. And it's like what we were talking about with like the fourth quarterbacks, like people grabbing Tyrod Taylor, Andy Dalton. When are you going to start that guy? Jacoby Myers in my draft went before Aguilar. And then I grabbed Aguilar and I thought, well, are you ever really going to start Myers? I can't see a world with their current personnel where that's the guy you're starting. But I can see a world where I'm starting Nelson Aguilar and he's on pace for 850 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns, and he's usable week to week. I can't really see that happening with Jacoby Myers when it was just him and Damiere Byrd last year, and then they bring in Aguilar, Henry, Jonnu. I took Paris Campbell at wide receiver 62, thinking, there's not 61 other receivers that have more upside than him, where like Russell Gage went before him. And I was just thinking about these guys and I'm like, are you really going to start Russell Gage week to week when he's the clear number 3 there behind Ridley and Pitts, if not even behind Zacchaeus. Like, we don't really know. Whereas Paris Campbell could be the one in Indianapolis. We don't really know, but that there is this upside there where, sure, if things break right, Paris Campbell is the starting receiver on what we think is going to be a pretty good offense. I don't see any world where some of these other random guys that I was talking about are ever going to be startable. Like, when is Jacoby Myers ever going to have that crazy upside? I don't know if you guys noticed that, but I really felt like my edge started to separate as the draft went on and on, where I'm thinking, are you really going to start that? Like, so Philip Lindsay went before Aguilar. And I was like, when are you starting the RB2 to RB4, somewhere in that range, on the Houston Texans, who doesn't catch passes and won't get goal line work? When are you starting that guy? So I don't know. Did you guys notice that play out in your draft? Since I noticed a huge shift around like the 11th, 12th round, when it started to seem like people didn't quite understand what kind of players they should be targeting.
Yeah, because it just refreshed on me. This is like middle of the 11th round, right? It went Sam Darnold, my boy Jonnu, but Jameis Winston, Cam Newton, and then the first kicker of the draft. And it's like, what are any of those things doing for you? Because you come back around and you like some of the picks that in the very next round, like Rashad Bateman goes in the 12th round. Hey, like that could be the best receiver in Baltimore on a passing offense. And yes, the past couple of seasons hasn't passed much, but could that have been caused by the fact that they didn't have any receivers, that Willie Snead was out there running most of the routes? Yeah. So it's like, what are people doing? This one was an accidental pick in the 10th round. Someone went Jared Goff, and that was their fourth quarterback. But still, like, 10th round, you drafted a fourth quarterback. You're screwed. Like, because just if you're starting 11 players, you can only start 2 quarterbacks. That means your 9th and 10th round, and in my opinion, is kind of a waste of pick. I mean, I'm really trying that in the first 11 rounds, I'm drafting 11 guys that I could start. At least that was just my philosophy going into that. Yes, a third quarterback, if it makes sense, like in there, sure. But I like the fourth quarterback. It's like, geez, like now you're hoping that the guy in the 13th round is an every week, or not every week, but starts more weeks for you than you'd expect. And man, that's not what I'm expecting my 13th round pick. I'm hoping that I can get a handful of games, but like, I'm not overly relying on my 13th round pick like this team is. It's just god awful.
That's interesting. Yeah. Another thing is, I think people misunderstanding the idea of handcuffing, and that you should really do it in a backfield where you're not sure who the starter is. I've seen people where they grab Zeke in the second round, and then they grab Pollard, and they say, what if Pollard becomes the league winner? I'm like, well, in a tournament with 2,000 people, when there's 100 something other people that are taking either that are going to be taking like just Pollard or just Zeke. Let's say that Zeke sucks and it becomes Pollard. Your team's dead in the water because your second round pick is putting up zeros. And the person who didn't take Zeke round 2, but took Pollard in the 12th, their team is kicking ass because they might have taken Jonathan Taylor in the second. So now they have Pollard and Taylor. You just have Pollard. And it's like, do people not understand that you want to get first place out of 2,000 teams? There's just certain things where it's like, are you going to start this guy any week? And then do you actually want to be first out of 2,000, or are you just afraid of finishing last? Which, like, who really cares? If you finish last because your round 1 or round 2 pick has a season ending ACL tear, no one's going to laugh at you like, ha ha, you took Zeke round 2 and then he tore his Achilles or something. It's like, okay, like there's no, it's not embarrassing that your team didn't do well if that happens. So you can't be drafting worried about these injuries. You just have to assume that all of your early picks are hitting. And that, yes, if I take Sermon in the 9th and then grab another San Francisco running back at the end of my draft, I mean, that's fine. Like, if your 9th round pick is only a semi hit and gets a few startable weeks, you can still win a tournament. But if your second round pick doesn't hit or first round pick doesn't hit, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. So the Zeke Pollard, and then the other one I see a lot of is like Cook Madison. And those are just complete zero upside moves in the tournament, where what do you expect to happen if you're starting the backup?
Exactly. And having so many starting spots too. I mean, you're starting half of your roster. So yeah, like it does come down to numbers. And when you talk about these handcuff running backs, when what would that be? 9%. Hold on. When 9% of your bench is a zero, like that can add up when it's 2, 3. Yeah, like I'm drafting each of these guys that even the bench guys are doing something that, and sometimes that has been making a difficult decision, because there was, let's see, where would it have been? I'm currently looking at my board here. Where did Pollard go? I can't find it, but like, there was in the rankings, of course, we're going to be transparent here. We're using your rankings to kind of base off of, and I love the tiered rankings because it's not so much of, oh, it's the top guy. It gives you flexibility because there, Pollard, James Conner, Gus Edwards, those guys were around the same spot there. And it allowed me to go, okay, I was one that went Zeke in the second round. So I knew, I was like, I'm going to draft Pollard. Like, I mean, sure, Pollard can be a league winner, but for this particular team, doesn't make sense for me. I'm drafting Zeke that early. If he goes down with an injury, I know I'm fucked. I'm either going to be first place or last, but who cares? Like, if you're second place in your division, it doesn't matter. Nobody cares about your standings in this unless you win the whole thing. Then yeah, you get to brag about it. So, it was some of the things I liked was getting into like round 14, like the final third of this draft. It was, I'm drafting guys that I go, I'm hoping more so that in the second half of the season they do something. I grabbed an Elijah Moore in the 15th round. Hey, the Jets, that receiving core, Corey Davis is supposedly the number one. How strong of a hold does he have on that position there? Like Elijah Moore, there is a possibility that he ends up being the best receiver for the Jets. If he doesn't do anything in the first half, oh well, I drafted him as my receiver 6. So he's not expected to start early on. Grabbing a Terrace Marshall in the 16th round. Hey, I know DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson are there, but Curtis Samuel and 97 targets are gone. Like Marshall in the 16th round has potential for 100 targets. Will he get that? Who knows? But I think it's at least of guys going around that range there, because Marshall is the 69th receiver off the board. I guarantee he has the best odds of getting 100 targets, even if he doesn't get 100 targets. So it's just kind of simple things like that. People just really overcomplicate things. I don't know. Like, it's some of these picks I go, what are you doing? Like, I have a person that went back-to-back kickers, and it's like, what's the goal here? Like, a kicker, okay, but back-to-back, like you're at least waiting late on these. I give you credit, 16th, 17th round. I'm wanting league winners. That's why a Dwayne Eskridge in the 19th round. Maybe he can run a straight line really well, and that's all Russell Wilson needs. Like, give me a shot on a player like that. I actually may be going Dan, right as I say it, that I was going to go Dan Arnold. My thing refreshed, and the team took Dan Arnold. That was some live action there. So I really liked Dan Arnold because, hey, he doesn't get a ton of targets, but it was like 12.5 yards per target, and going to a team that clearly wanted to upgrade tight end. So, I'm just, hey, high upside. Now I don't know what I'll do at tight end, but yeah, cross that bridge when it comes back to me. I gambled a little too much on that one.
Well, I'm on the clock. I think I'm going to take Christian Kirk at the 1704.
Love
because
it.
Nice.
If he actually is the slot monster that he was in college, and the team is incredibly fast paced, which we expect, it could be a pretty good pick, especially when if I look at who went just before him, let's see, we have the last three picks were Traquan Smith, Terrace Marshall. Fine. Here's the unique one. At wide receiver 71, with guys like Christian Kirk still on the board, Hunter Renfrow went the pick before me. So that is a classic case of you really need to spin a web and keep spinning it over and over and then get drunk to convince yourself that Hunter Renfrow is going to be the guy that you are flexing at any point this season.
Right.
Like, what are we doing with Hunter Renfrow? There's probably 100 guys on the board right now that I would say have more upside to ever get flexed than
Hunter Renfrow.
I don't even know. Is he the wide receiver 4 there? 5, 6? At this point, I have no
Does
idea.
he make the team?
I think Zay Jones is still there. Like, who's he? There's going to be a lot of guys chomping at the bit for 25 Derek Carr targets on the season. He's one of them. I don't know.
That was funny because Kirk went 1703 in mine, and that was who I wanted at 1704. So we're thinking alike on that one because Kirk's not sexy, right? Like, because
I like those guys.
Well, yeah, it's because people get burned, right? And sometimes we're just a year early on these guys.
Right.
That's actually a couple of Breakout Finder articles I got coming out where, trying to predict breakout guys. Like, we may just be like, you do have to have some luck, and sometimes things don't work out so well. I think a Miles Sanders one's coming out first, and there's a lot to like on the profile. And at the end of the day, you just have to go, look, of course he didn't break out. Like, Carson Wentz was at quarterback, turning over the ball a lot. So with bring it back to Kirk, like, yeah, especially 17th round, like, I think we've seen his floor. Like, he's still going to get fed. Yes, Rondell Moore's exciting, but Kirk is still the established veteran there.
I just went Kirk. It was him and Sterling Shepard, and I went with the guy I think is going to be in a better offense. I have them in the same tier. They're pretty close. Kirk 2 slots ahead in the rankings, and just kind of leaned on the better offense. So we'll see what happens there. But I think both Kirk and Shepard are good picks there, where you can see both of them having 800 receiving yards and being flexible each week.
Absolutely.
And
only
I'm just
going
to
take your Daniel Jones. I took Shepard, and I think you took Jones. Let's combine them here. Let's get a little stack.
I did take Daniel Jones. But with me, one quick point on the handcuffs. I love what you said when you're looking at, there's those ambiguous backfields and targeting those players, but not drafting Zeke and Pollard. The only time I find that feasible is in Dynasty. And even then, personally, I'm only doing it if it is those high-end handcuffs, such as a Tony Pollard. So otherwise, I don't want to waste the bench spot ever in any league. So I very much agree with that. And I also, when you're talking about these later round wide receivers, like you've got such a great point. I drafted with purpose. I'm going after these guys. I didn't get Devontae Parker, but I was looking at him, these kinds of guys. I have Rashad Bateman, Brian Edwards, Jalen Reagor, Tyrell Williams, all guys that have a very good chance of being the 1 or 2 on their teams. And yeah, you might think the Lions offense isn't going to be that great, but I've always kind of like Tyrell Williams, and he's probably going to get a lot of opportunity this year. So these are the kind of guys I'm looking at. I'm not looking, to take a shot as you like a Hunter Renfrow. What the hell is that? So, I can't disagree with anything really you guys said. As I told Aaron, we're done in my division, and I'm pretty happy with my team overall. As I told Aaron off pod, like, I feel like I could have gotten my third QB. I could have waited on him and gotten a better third running back. I think maybe that's the one place I might have misstepped. But I think other than that, I'm fairly happy. So it's been fun. It's an honor to be in it. And yeah, You guys make a lot of great points. I can't disagree with any of them. So we're going to wrap it up with that. Aaron, you know what? You did much better, the last couple of topics. So we're going to go ahead on this last one and give you 3 points, which brings your total up to 4, which means Larky gets a 2 and so 11-4. Very good effort, Aaron. But the win goes to Mr. Larky. He's the mad champion of the week. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. We appreciate you being here, man. Very much so. And don't forget to check him out on Twitter at JLarkyTweets. The R coding site. Check out all that stuff. Man, dude's on fire. Dude is on fire. Aaron, you got anything? You want to close this out, buddy? You got anything to say? Final thoughts? Either one of you?
It's like going to school here, but like the enjoyable kind too. Like when you have smart guests on the show, we get to learn. And,
Right.
It's with Josh is in high demand. Every time I get on Twitter, he's on podcasts. He's doing mock drafts now. Like, so the fact that Josh was able to fit us into his schedule there, like what an honor, man. It was awesome.
Very much so.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I mean, I had to skip out on a few meals and appearances for this. I'm just kidding. I was excited to come on. I feel like it's always fun to talk football with Roto Underworld people because we all have sort of that baseline knowledge. And I feel like it makes the conversation flow better when everyone is sort of in agreement on certain basic principles of fantasy. So this was a good time.
Indeed. Enjoyed it, man. All right. We're going to get the hell out of here. Once again, Ron Stu09 on Twitter for the salary captain. At JLarkyTweets for Mr. Josh Larky, the luxurious Josh Larky. And at RMK Madness for me. Thanks for joining. We'll talk to y'all next week. Peace out.
We're mad here in the Dynasty Wonderland.
All right, we should be good to go. Good to go.